Why do you play the games that you play? What is it that draws you towards different shows and away from others? After my first time playing Persona 5, this question has set up a home in my head, and it hasn't left since. You see, I'm not usually much for JRPGs. I mostly like shooting games, racing games, fighting games, anything with fast and fun movement. That means that JRPGs don't typically work their way onto my list of games to play. Most JRPGs have little noteworthy movement to speak of and don't offer fast-paced, action-oriented gameplay. However, there are two series in my life that have broken this trend: Fire Emblem and Persona. I first played Fire Emblem on my 3DS through the free demo that you could download from the eShop. I played this demo over and over, non-stop. I would play it in my bed beneath the covers at night, under my desk at school, and anywhere else I could sneak a 3DS into. I loved this single level demo so much that I could play it over and over, but it never occurred to me to just purchase the full game. That is, until one day I realized I clearly enjoy this game, so I should just buy it. So I did, and I bought every other Fire Emblem game that came after it. I think the reason that it took me so long to realize I should just buy the game was that I wasn't used to enjoying strategy RPGs. After playing through the full game multiple times, I just kind of moved on. I never really questioned what it was about Fire Emblem Awakening that caught my eye, but I knew that now I was a Fire Emblem fan. Fast forward to years later where I now have a job and Spider-Man for the PS4 has just been released. I figured now that I have money of my own, I would pick up a PS4 and try out Spider-Man and one other game that I had seen on the internet. Of course, that game was none other than Persona 5. At this point, I'd kind of been actively avoiding most JRPGs that weren't Fire Emblem because I figured I knew what I liked and I didn't like JRPGs. But there was something special about Persona. I felt inexplicably drawn to it for reasons that I couldn't quite put my finger on at the time. So after getting my PS4, I downloaded Spider-Man and I played it for a bit, but every time I did, I just had this nagging feeling that I should be playing something else. After too much thinking, I finally started Persona 5, and I set out on my journey to see if it would really deliver on that unexplainable draw. Of course, it did. In fact, it delivered so much that it has become my favorite game of all time. After beating it though, I was left with a much different feeling than when I beat Fire Emblem. A question had begun to take place in my head. Why did I feel the need to play a game from a genre I knew I'm not likely to enjoy? As time passed, and I tried more and more new things, this question broadened into why do I pick the things that I pick? What draws me towards new experiences? But most importantly, what was it about Persona 5 specifically that made me so intrigued? After literal years of reflection and heavy thought over this, I think I'm about ready to dissect one aspect of that question. Persona has many elements that make up my love for the game. From story to characters to sound design, all of it is great, but no part is as instantly recognizable as the visual design. Persona 5 pulls out all the stops when it comes to art direction, and it desperately wants you to know that. From the very beginning, it was hyper-focused on having a unique visual flair that would work its way into the player's head and make damn sure they wouldn't soon forget it. Its colors are bold, loud, and large. The shapes that make up the menus are purposefully non-uniform. The lines are jagged with sharp edges that quickly change direction to reveal wild, concentric, overlapping star-filled backgrounds. It is a vibrant visual explosion that is dripping in style and suave to an excessive degree. But I assure you, all of this fanfare, all of this theming is designed with intent. The art of Persona 5 has been meticulously handcrafted to represent the core themes and elements of the game. There are two main aspects of this design that I want to talk about, so let's break it up by color and by contrast. Let's begin with the most apparent of the two, color. Color in Persona 5 is used with intention. Each instance of a repeated color scheme can denote something about what the player is seeing. The health and SP bars are very good obvious examples of this phenomenon. Whenever you see skills colored with a tealish green hue, you know they're most likely involved with healing in some way. Alternatively, this is also displayed in the magic and physical attacks. Elemental spells will be colored accordingly to their element, such as red for fire or green for wind. Physical attacks, on the other hand, will be represented by yellow, and Almighty as white, presumably because it deals outside of the confines of elemental and physical weaknesses and resistances. Turning our attention away from gameplay elements, however, is where this coloration begins to shine as one of the defining factors of Persona 5. The primary color scheme through most of the game is red, black, and white. Usually, the emphasis is on red with black and white supporting. With red being the main color, that comes with many associations. Red is often described as the color of passion. It carries high emotional intensity with it, and as such, it is right at home in a game like Persona. The intense shade of red reinforces the rebellious tone of the story and bolsters one of the main themes of the game. I propose that red is meant to be the primary color that represents the Phantom Thieves as a group. It's passionate, it's fiery, it's angry. The Phantom Thieves are a group of kids that are sick and tired of accepting their lot in life and being pushed down by those who hold power over them. To get the player invested and really get their blood pumping, it covers the game in red, so that even when you're just scrolling through menus looking at items, that sense of justice-fueled passionate rage never leaves your body. I cannot think of a more fitting color with which to paint the Phantom Thieves because they are the embodiment of what red represents. Looking through the game's UI, it's as if the group's anger, pain, and hatred and passion are bursting at the seams, spilling out over the world around them, painting everything you interact with in a bloody red. Surrounding that red is the black and white that act as a powerful contrast to the bright coloration of the rest of the game. Black and white is often a color scheme that's used to imply good and evil. Often, black is used to display the antagonist, while white is reserved for the pure of heart who are destined to banish all evil from the world. But here, black and white are jumbled and mixed together haphazardly. In the context of Persona, it seems to imply that there isn't such a clear answer as black and white, and instead, the visuals here postulate that good and evil are inherently connected. A similar interpretation of black and white can be seen in the famous yin-yang symbol, which essentially has the same symbolic meaning. Now, the bright red seen in Persona 5's UI is constantly cut off or broken by repetitive black and white patterns. These patterns obviously serve the purpose of adding visual appeal, but the specific choice to design the two-tone elements of the menus with black and white is much more than just an aesthetic decision. The fact that black and white are always seen together making up a bigger pattern implies that even in the good, there is bad, and that it is necessary to complement and support the fire that burns red. The dichotomy between black and white is meant to represent the moral gray zone in which the Phantom Thieves operate. These two-tone patterns are always linked to the red flare that represents the group, and as such, I firmly believe that the color scheme was intentionally designed to be an artistic manifestation of the Phantom Thieves. In the same way that color is inherently tied to the core themes of the game, I believe that there is also deeper meaning in the choice to make the visuals highly saturated and contrasting. I think the contrast is meant to represent different things in different cases, but for the whole game, it seems that the vibrant, blown-out, over-the-top colors are representative of the Phantom Thieves, while the less exciting colors are emblematic of their daily lives. The extreme contrast between the bright reds and the sharp blacks and whites is a perfect parallel for the gameplay that is constantly switching between two extremes. The contrast in the UI is extremely interesting, but there's actually one other point of visual distinction that is perhaps even more revealing of the game's message. The Velvet Room has been a staple of the Persona series since the beginning. First appearing in Persona 1, it has always been shown to be a calm, blue room run by Igor and his various assistants. On my first playthrough of the game, I never really gave the Velvet Room too much thought, but my second time around, as I really chewed on what made me love this game, I realized that the Velvet Room is a perfect juxtaposition to the rest of the game. As most of the other visuals symbolize rebellious spirit and passion, the Velvet Room, by contrast, is covered in a cool, calm blue. This immediately tells the player there is something special about this room. On top of that, all of the menus in this room are covered in chains and iconography of a prison. I believe that in Persona 5, the Velvet Room is meant to represent control. And to those of you who have finished the game, this should be an obvious conclusion. Spoilers for vanilla Persona 5, by the way, so skip to the time on the screen to avoid them. At the end of Persona 5, the man you thought to be Igor is revealed to be Yaldabaoth, the god of control. He is hell-bent on ridding the world of free will, and as such, his interpretation of the Velvet Room fits this goal. The Velvet Room here is a prison coated in blue, a color that's often used to represent stability, control, and in certain circumstances, heaven. There could not be a more fitting color scheme to portray Yaldabaoth's will. And if you think heaven being used as a connection to Yaldabaoth is a stretch, look no further than the mini boss rush at the end of the game where you fight a gauntlet of angels. For further connections between Yaldabaoth and heaven, turn your attention towards the final boss of the game, where Joker defeats Yaldabaoth by summoning his true persona Satanael and shoots God in the face, literally. Now, it is certainly a fact that the coloration of the Velvet Room is just a mere coincidence that just so happens to work well as a juxtaposition to the rest of the game. But That coincidence is recognized and built upon. The art team went out of their way to lean into the themes of control by exaggerating the elements of imprisonment present in the room. Compare that to the Velvet Rooms of past, which are usually more comfortable and luxurious looking. There's simply no possible way that they didn't know what they were doing. The Velvet Room is a perfect example of exactly why Persona 5's style is inseparable from its substance. While critics of the game may say that it focuses too much on visual flair, I would argue that said visual flair is absolutely integral to reinforcing the core message of the narrative and encouraging players to find these themes and dissect them. The substance of Persona 5 is not only in the story, but it is baked into every aspect of the game, from the music to the dungeons to the characters. Everywhere you look, you can find a path that leads back to the core elements that make up Persona 5, and I think that is what drew me in. Just by laying eyes on Persona 5, even without knowing it at the time, I was already developing connections about what the game was like. It puts its heart on its sleeve, and it proudly shows it to anyone who will look. This unapologetic visual direction is what made me fall in love with the game, and I think it deserves all the praise that it gets. Now, the visuals of Persona 5 definitely don't end here, and I could talk about them for ages, but this video is already getting a bit long, so I think I'll cut it here. If you found this video interesting or fun to listen to, make sure to hit that like button, as it really helps me out. And if you want to hear me talk more, you can subscribe right now for free. With that said, I just want to say thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.